About 45 hours in, it's got all the primer on it. It's going to get on it, and I sanded it pretty much all out. Now before I go in, I guess I'm in the sanding mode. Before I go in the next phase, which is painting this, we're going to sand it all off with 600 sandpaper. We're going to sand it down till it's transparent, and we're going to use a soft block and try to get it all off. Let's see if we can't cut some of the weight down. There's no need to carry around the extra primer, so we just want to make sure that it's all flat and level. It's looking real good, but I'm not going to show you hours and hours of sanding this thing out, so I'm going to cut the camera, continue to sand, be back in probably another 5 hours. That'll be 50 hours sanding, and then maybe we can paint the canopy. So we'll see you in a short. Okay, about 50 hours of sanding in. We're ready to start painting the canopy area. We're still not done sanding, but I want to get the canopy started, so we're going to paint the canopy area. And I just take my airbrush and I'm going to dust on a few light coats. Get it on too thick, it'll mottle. Sure to get inside real good. I'm going to have to turn the fan on. Once I like the smell of dope, it's getting pretty overpowering here. Anyway, we got one coat on the canopy area. One real good coat. And we'll come back in a half an hour and put another coat on it. Then we'll wait a half an hour and paint the floor black and mount the canopy. We're going to do the panel lines inside like Tom had and everything. Plus I still have to make up those air tanks. So I got the day's work cut out for us. It's getting kind of late in the day. It's probably around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Maybe 4 because of time change. But I'll work on it until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning tonight. But the painting stops around 11 o'clock. Got to let it air out so we can go to sleep, but we'll get another coat on it and I'll start detailing the cockpit. So we'll see when I come back. Okay, where we are now is got 3 coats of white paint on the canopy area, and I'm using acrylic paint, black paint, artist paint, to paint the floor black. The reason why I'm using acrylic is it dries flat black. Probably put 2 coats of this on, being careful not to get any on the outside. like I say, don't worry about getting it all covered in the first coat. Just because it'll take a couple of coats, I'm sure. Now the Monado, I sprayed this first, but we built this airplane a little different. Seems like each one I build is just slightly different. We're not going to have a lot of cockpit detail, just the pilot, maybe a stick, those air tanks behind the pilot, and maybe a seat. I'm not sure yet. I have to look at the pictures. When I get done here, I want to talk about the proper way to use a brush, because unless you've been a sign painter in the past, you're probably not going to realize how to do it. The heel of the brush, you load the paint on the brush, and the heel of the brush is where the shank or the metal meets the bristles. That's the heel. And when you're doing a line and making a nice straight line, and you want it to be even, you put the brush down onto the surface, and you push it down to the heel, and then pull the heel around. And you'll get a nice line. If you do it any differently, the line won't be straight. And trust me, maybe not with this brush, but with a brush I can do a line as straight as if you taped it. By that method. And we'll let that coat dry, and I'll come back and do another coat. The nice thing about acrylic paints is if there is a screw up, you just wipe it off with water. So we'll come back, be about a half hour, and she'll be dry. So we'll see you then. Okay, since I last shot the last segment of the video, I took my airbrush and I shot a little white on this because I shot the top where the canopy goes, but I painted all the way back one coat, and it was kind of just a test to see exactly how I did on my sanding. I gotta keep sanding because there's some spots here that are in definite need of attention. The places to look for are right here at the end of the wing fillets and any of the joints or whatever. Now this came out pretty good, but it's not quite ready to sand. Dope takes longer to dry than primer, so it'll probably take 24 hours before it's really ready to sand. It's only been a couple of hours. But I can go ahead and blow the canopy area on. So we'll do that here next. I have one coat on it, but I want to kind of sand out any of the bad spots on the first coat. Remember, this is just under the canopy. But it shows you that one coat, I painted the back half of the fuselage. You can do it with an airbrush, and we'll probably paint this whole model with an airbrush because I'm worried about weight. A paint gun will put it on nicer. It also puts it on heavier. So anyway, we'll get another coat on here, and I've been looking at the attachment of this canopy. And this canopy is different than the Monado canopy. I think I'm going to mark a line and dig it in a little bit so that I don't have that big a area to fill on the edge there. So I'll mark a line and we'll dig her in. 1/16 of an inch groove I'll cut around it and then put the epoxy in it, and that way it'll mold into the fuselage a little better than it would otherwise. Otherwise I gotta add a lot of putty, and I just don't want to do it. It's still relatively light. Not extremely light, but it'll be fine. So let's put a little paint on that canopy so we can get it drying, and or cockpit area, get it drying. This is the second coat. Still need to make my air tanks. That's it. So I'll make the air tanks off camera and we'll get that glued in. I already did paint the the floor of the cockpit the flat black, and it'll probably get another coat. I don't think that the paint that I had put on picked up much weight, the first coat at the back there. Let's see here. Set the pilot and the canopy on. I can tell you exactly how much that picked up. Picked up about 10 grams, all that paint after the CG. No, that's not right. No, that is right, 10 grams. So, and it'll gas off. So I'm going to paint this whole model with the airbrush, because I don't want it to, I don't want to gain a whole lot of weight. When I put the clear on, I'll put it on with the spray gun, because you can put the clear on and sand it off. The colored paint, you know, you just sand the bad spots, but you're going to have to leave enough on there. So that's where we are this evening. I'll try to carry on, and when I get to the point where I'm going to mark the canopy out and dig it in, I'll show you that. So we'll be back when I get to that area. Okay, I've placed the canopy on here, and I took a ballpoint pen and I drew a line all the way around it. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a scalpel and we're going to cut a V into this so that about a 1/16 of an inch. Hopefully I've left enough meat in there. I think I have. We'll cut a V in this and then dig out a groove. So we got the scalpel here. And I really hate cutting on these. After I spent all that time to get it smooth, here I am cutting it up. But in order to get a nice job, I need to set that canopy down into the wood. Okay, we'll cut that. And I'm just cutting along that line. And we're going to come up from that line about a 1/16 of an inch and cut straight down towards the bottom of the airplane to get a groove, and then I'll pick that out. I really like these scalpels. I like it better than an X-Acto knife. Easier to control. Okay. Went around there. Now we'll come up about a 1/16 of an inch and make another cut running parallel to that first cut. Remember, I just want to set the canopy down into the wood. I've already taken the canopy and taped up about 1/4 of an inch, and I took a T-pin and I poked holes through it at the bottom. So that the epoxy and a superfill has a place to bind to. Now you'll notice I'm making these cuts. I didn't draw a second line. It doesn't have to be perfect, but this is close. And I don't expect everyone to be able to do this on the first try out. I got a lot of practice doing this. Well, you can tell that this is fiberglass up here. It's hard, hard, hard. So we're not going to get too much there, but we're going to still pick it out. Okay, so second line's been drawn. Now you come back and we'll pick it out. I will probably take a piece of sandpaper and sand the groove as well. get this done, I'll zoom in and show you what I'm doing. Let me check it, make sure that it's going to sit down in there. Oh yeah, it's nicely. Much more better. Really need to be on this side to do this. And pull it toward me. Remember, this is, if you watch the Monado canopy install, I did not do this on the Monado. So every situation is different. You kind of have to evaluate each job. You can't just say, well, I'm going to do this all the time, this way, because that's not the case. So you get the idea what I'm doing here. Digging the groove out. And the better you get this to fit, the easier it'll be to finish off. We should have real good adhesion because we're going right to the wood with the glue. Except up here where it's fiberglass, it will be plastic to fiberglass. So now, that canopy should fit right into that groove. And it does. this again, make sure that we're down enough here. Yeah, see, I missed by a little bit here. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a piece of sandpaper, 80 grit. This is sticky back, fold it in half, stick it together, and we'll just sand this groove. Well, almost about good enough. Might have to hit it with another coat of paint. I don't know. No, it'll be fine. Anyway, I'll zoom in here. See the groove I cut? Right there. And when you push the canopy down, it stays on there. You get it in the right spot. Require less putty. It's flush with the sides here because we inset it, and it should be a clean install. So just tinker with it, make sure that you got her on there right. As a matter of fact, when I go to glue this on, it'll be nothing to get it to work. You want to make sure that you paint a 1/4 inch at the bottom of the canopy from the inside, the same color as the airplane, because you don't want the glue and the epoxylite, or in this case superfill, to show on the inside. If you don't paint that, when you go ahead and use the superfill on the outside, you'll look in the canopy and you'll see a blue line, and you don't want that. So we'll get that painted up and get that drying. I'll get my pilot and my air tanks made for the back, and we'll get that in. I am going to have to, before I paint the fuselage back there, I am going to have to go around and doctor up any of the spots that I see, because we're not going to put a lot of paint on this airplane. It's going to be very minimal because I want to keep it relatively light. I mean, if I wasn't worried about weight, we'd take it to the spray booth, the car body shop or something, and just spray on base coat, clear coat, and load her up with paint, and she'd be just beautiful. She'd also weigh 70 ounces, so we don't want to do that. Want it in the 40s, low 50s tops. And it looks like it's going to be, I think it's going to be around 48 ounces or so. But who knows? I mean, this is all a guess. Let's get the pilot in there and see what he looks like. Needs another coat of black, flat black inside there. And I'll do that before I glue the canopy on. I wish I had some of them air tanks made up that I didn't have to make those. Have to spend an hour or so making those darn things. Head don't touch the top, so we're good there. Let me make sure I get him centered up here. Yes, indeed. This is the airplane that started my love for stunt, so I've always had a special place in my heart for this airplane. So anyway, we'll cut the camera. Not going to bore you to death with my nonsense, but I'll get a coat of paint on the inside. We'll get the pilot glued in. Do the paint on the inside of the canopy, and then epoxy the canopy on. And when I do that, I'll come back. But until then, we'll see you in a few. Well, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm still working on this. I want to paint this before I go to bed. I'm going around the outside of the canopy, the perimeter of the canopy on the inside. Up about 1/4 inch, so that when I epoxy it on, you can't see the epoxy. You can't see the bare wood groove that we cut, and you won't be able to see the superfill. Very important if you want a real clean job. Now, it was said to me on the question and answers that you guys wanted to see more sanding. Well, the majority of the sanding is done on this airplane. I spent the last 50 hours sanding. So there's not going to be a whole lot more sanding on this airplane. However, control line craftsman is not just about one airplane. As soon as this one's done, I'll start building something else. I think we're going to do our classes. On design and building a profile. Or we might build a full stunt ship, whatever. I mean, you guys got to tell me what you want to see. I made one of the air tanks that go, or the air tank that goes in here, and how I did that was on the drill press. I drilled a hole in a piece of balsa wood and put a dowel, glued a dowel in it, and on the drill, turned the drill press on and sanded it to a cylinder. Only takes a few minutes to do that. I think we better stop painting. I keep going up on the line here. Yep, that looks pretty good. Then after it's glued on, we'll tape it on the outside and paint it from the outside. And you won't be able to tell. I think we need a little more on the front because we're going to have to fill it up there. So it needs a thicker line. I hope you guys are getting something from Control Line Craftsman. I was asked why some of the videos are on YouTube but not on Control Line Craftsman. Well, that's to promote Control Line Craftsman. Not everybody knows it's out there. And they're not the same videos that are being posted on YouTube. They are shorts of the entire film. I'm going to make one more pass here and then I got to set this down before I screw it up. We'll set it down. You can't keep painting and painting and painting. Okay, sausage CA'd, sanded, and primed. And doesn't weigh anything, so we're still in good shape. I'll have to prime and sand this as many times as it takes to get it smooth to accept. And I gotta tell you this is Duplicolor silver lacquer paint. It goes on the best I've ever seen silver go on. It's great stuff, and it dries fast. I use that paint on the leading edge of my Thunderbolt wing in '07, and I've had that can around since '07, and I don't know whether they make that, but it's Duplicolor lacquer paint, and it works great. So, if you need any silver for just some small pieces, that's the stuff to use. So, I'll be back in a bit after I keep sanding and get another coat on it and get this painted silver, so we'll see you then. Okay, wasted a little time today making the first set of air tanks here. I didn't like them. We got another air tank here in silver. I'll paint the bands black, and we'll test it and see if I like that. Back to using the acrylic paint. Take your time. I put the plywood bands on it. That's 64th plywood. And when you're using 64th plywood, these little detail areas, you gotta test it. It'll bend one way real easy and the other way real hard. So, even though this would bend easy, I had to soak it with Windex to get it to bend around such a tight radius, because this tube is only approximately a ½ inch in diameter. And that's a pretty tight radius. Take your time getting this painted. My hands are pretty steady from the experience of sign painting. But with practice you can do it too. Seeing as that the economy is so bad, I might have to go back to sign painting just so I could paint for sale signs or help wanted, or there's no help, but food wanted. I got a feeling it's going to get worse before it gets better. I'm just freehanding this on. You could probably tape it off, but I just freehanded it. Get you a look at it here. Just freehanded on there. That'll be plenty good. I'll finish up the other side and we'll be back. We'll see what it looks like in probably a half an hour. So see you in a bit. As my air tank is drying, it should be dry in just a minute or so here, I want to talk about the most important piece of this air tank, and that's this 64th piece of plywood here. Now you wouldn't think that would mean much, but I'll show you what it does. I'm going to use my second air tank here. What I'm going to do with that is I'm going to take my X-Acto and I'm going to cut a notch in the other tank right down the center. If you don't do this or something similar, you'll be sorry. This notch, this tab, gets inserted into that slot that I just made, that I didn't make long enough. So we don't need it that long, this tab. These things I tell you, you don't have to do them. You don't have to do anything. These are only suggestions. But after building so many airplanes, I know something. Anyway, that piece of plywood gets forced into the tank like that. And then we're going to cut a slot in the fuselage right down the center and stick it in the slot and CA this to the fuselage. If you don't, I can just about guarantee that over time the tank will fall off and it'll be flopping around inside the cockpit. I mean, like I said, anything I do here is not an absolute gospel. You can do whatever you like. You can glue it on and take your chances, or you can just add a little insurance like I did here. So here's my completed air tank. I want it to sit in the middle of this, and I do think that the single is going to look better than the double did. Yeah, I like that a lot better. So I will slot my air tank and then slot the fuselage right down the center, and we'll push that together and it'll be on there. So take my air tank off, find the worst side, so you put the worst side down, obviously. Of course it all looks pretty good. I'm going to change this blade out. Here's a word of caution. If you bought the scalpel blades, like I did, they're hard to get in and out of the holder. Use a pair of pliers. I've already cut myself and had to CA my finger together. That went flying somewhere. And how I put these scalpel blades on is I leave them in the package, hold it with the cardboard that's the protector in the package, and put the blade on. Here again, you can do whatever you like, but I've already cut myself. I'm just passing it on to you so you don't cut yourself. So we got the worst side down. We might get to gluing the canopy on today, I don't know. And we're going to cut a slot right down the center. nice thing about doing it this way, I should be able to get it on perfectly straight. Now it does not have to be more than a 1/16 or an 1/8 of an inch into each section. It doesn't have to be halfway through or anything like that. It just has to be so that wood to wood bond goes with the CA. And then take your CA and drop it down in the, glue it into the crack. Maybe. Open up the bottle again. And we will white glue this on. I'm not going to CA it to the fuselage, because the CA will run down the side, so we'll use white glue, and any of that dries, it dries clear. So it's now CA'd into my oil tank, or my oxygen tank, both sides. And that's what it should look like. Now for positioning. We have to figure out, let me get the pilot out of here, exactly where the center is. So I just eyeball it where I want it and push down. Make sure this is straight up and down. And that made an indent there, and we'll take the X-Acto knife make sure it gets on there right. Get one chance. Well, let's see how that looks. I like it. Looks good. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick that up and I'm going to brush some white paint on it. That way it'll disappear. You don't want to have any of the, I mean, nobody's going to get down there and look that close, I don't believe, but hey, you never know. If I ever fly this at the Nationals, you know, the appearance judges, they look at every little tiny speck and they so we'll go ahead and brush a little white paint on that so it disappears. Put some white glue on it and set it back in there. So you don't have to worry about that popping off. So that's a good thing. All this does is make any wood color disappear. You'd have to be 2 foot away to see it, but like I say, them judges at the Nationals, it didn't take any more time to brush a little bit of white paint on it. It'll be dry in just a second and we can glue it on. Then the next thing is we're going to have to get all this stuff clean. We want a dust-free environment. I don't want any dust inside the cockpit. I can't believe this cockpit has been taking me 2 days to get on. Day 26 today. Still going a lot faster than the Monado did. Don't want any fingerprints on anything, so of course I dropped it. Okay, Little Elmer's white glue. And the reason behind the white glue is, like I said, it dries clear because you are going to smear some out of that groove, but it dries clear and won't run down the side of the fuselage. You don't need much, because this thing don't weigh much. And before I fit the canopy on, I will pull on a test pull to make sure it's on there good. I think I'm going to slot a little bit more. Force all the glue off the part. And we'll put a little glue on here so it goes down in there. Some are probably cringing, oh no, he's getting glue all over. Well, not to worry, I'll wipe it off. I'd rather have a little glue than have this piece fall off when the canopy glued on. Now I put it on. Yep, that's on there. It's on there good, I can tell. I'm thinking about taking a piece of wire, possibly. Yeah, this copper wire is, I'll have to look around and see if I got maybe I got a piece of aluminum wire as a tube to go down into the cockpit. You know, I think I do have a piece of wire. Now this is some sealing suspension wire. And it's aluminum, but it feels very heavy, so we'll see what a little piece weighs. Too heavy. So, okay, it's taken me all day to get this far. Mainly because I made that first piece and didn't like it. But that's alright. So, I was talking about tubing to see if I could find some wire or tubing. Well, what I did was is I took a piece of 60-40 solder, about 1 inch and a quarter, and bent it and drilled 2 holes and put it in so that I could simulate that this tank was hooked up to something. You don't want to have it just hanging off in outer space, so we simulated this tube right here. I glued it in with white glue. Now, inside the cockpit, I'd scratched up, let me see if I'd scratched up the floor right here where the pilot sits. I removed it right down to the bare wood, because you don't want to glue the pilot to paint because he has a chance to come off. So what we have here you got to keep in mind, because we're thinking about longevity of the model. We have that key that keys in the air tank into the fuselage. It's white glued in. I have this piece of solder that's drilled in probably a ½ inch this way and drilled through the floor till it touches the wing so it can't move up or down, and it's white glued in. I've scratched up the floor of the cockpit so that I can glue my pilot on, and he has a wood base, so it'll be wood to wood and he won't be coming out. So what I need to do is we're going to mix up some epoxy, and I'm going to go ahead and put him in there, and then when that epoxy dries, we'll go ahead and mount the canopy finally. And today we will get the canopy mounted. It was a lot of preparation to get it ready to go, but I think it's going to be worth it. So give me a few minutes, I'll mix some epoxy up, and we'll be back. Okay, I'm back. We have our favorite epoxy mixing tool, which is Model Aviation. This is the only use I get out of this magazine. Once in a great while, there's a good article in it. But in all honesty, we only have ourselves to blame, because we are the people who submit the articles. If nobody submits an article, there's nothing to read. But they seem to cater to multi-rotor ARFs, and that's the way they want it, so whatever. Mix up some 15-minute epoxy. Could have been 5, but I don't have any. I have my popsicle sticks. Remember, this is the last time you're going to get any chance to wipe anything off, so I get a paper towel and I take some Windex and I just dampen the paper towel, and what the dampening does is it attracts dust, and we're going to dust our pilot off for the last time, because I don't want any dust down in that area. So now, instead of putting the glue on the pilot, we're going to put it on the floor, which I've already marked out. And we've scraped it down to the wood. I use the motor tool, the Dremel. You want to hold it back from the edge, because you don't want that epoxy seeping out from underneath them. And when you push him down, that's just what's going to happen. So I put him in here, turn him, and gently set him down. I got a Q-tip here. There's a little bit at the leading edge of his suit that's oozing out. We'll wipe that away. Pull him forward. That's better. Now just wait the 15 minutes. before you glue that canopy down, you want to make sure that he's in there solid. You don't want to him coming out. So I just leave him alone. He's in there centered. He's in there straight. Here's the first set of tanks I made that I didn't like. I don't think they would have looked as good as the one that I have in there now. So we got that. I'll just set this back on here, but we'll wait the probably 30 minutes to make sure that the glue is completely cured. Then I'm going to try to pick the pilot up out of there and make sure he's 100% stuck to the floor. And once I do that, we'll come back, put the epoxy in the groove, set the canopy down, and that'll be glued on for the evening. And then I can tape it out and do the super fill around it, and we can start puttying and sanding around there. And shortly, maybe a day or two, we'll be ready to actually paint the airplane. Instead of like what I did back here, I just shot some paint on it to see what it was going to look like and see how it was going to take. This was airbrushed on, and we're probably going to paint the whole model with the airbrush because I don't want a lot of weight on it. So that's where we are. Going to be another day getting the cockpit blended in, I'm sure. And that's just the way that it goes. So we'll see you in a short. Okay, been about an hour. Here's the test. You grab a hold of the pilot, pick up the airplane. If you can do that, you're probably not going to come out of there. We certainly don't want that to happen. So now we can move ahead with the gluing on of the canopy. This piece has been glued on. It's kind of out of balance there, but it'll lift the airplane up, the tank, and the little hose, so it's in there solid. We don't have to worry about that. Now I have to debate, do I want to put any ink lines in there? And I'm not sure that I do. It would be best just to get going along with the project here and glue this down and move ahead. But we do want to go through and wipe out any dust one more time. So I'm going to take a break for dinner. I just thought that I'd come back and show you how I check and see if the pilot's in there glued in good enough. You got to lift your airplane up by the pilot, and that's with the full weight of the airplane on the pilot. If you can do that, you know he's not going to fly out of there. I've seen so many airplanes where the pilot's flopping around in the cockpit. That is, one, that would have to be embarrassing, and two, that's just no good. Put all that work in and have that happen. So we'll get all the dust out of this, and when I come back from dinner, we'll glue her in there. I'll go ahead and post this video tonight on Control Line Craftsman so you can see how this was done. Somebody was asking me, he's seeing some videos on YouTube but not in Control Line Craftsman. That's because I don't feel that the videos that I posted up for free on YouTube, you know, were basically Control Line Craftsman material. This material here that I'm showing you is actual building tips and tricks. So, you know, I take a short segment out of the film and post it up for free on YouTube so that, you know, others can see what we're doing in here. Remember, we're going to be doing a build along here in the next month or so. When I get this done, I'm going to take a break for a whole day because I have a customer job that I have to get out and finish up. And I promised that I would do that last week, and I didn't, so I've got to do that. So we'll be back after dinner, and I'll glue the canopy on, so see you in a bit. Okay, shop's been cleaned up, and we're going to glue the canopy on. Take my favorite mixing station, which is Model Aviation, and we mix up the epoxy. I think the reason why I like to use Model Aviation the best is it has slick pages. And when you're done mixing the epoxy, you just tear the page out and throw it away. And then you got another spot to mix. Now we've cut the groove in this. I went around it with sandpaper. We have our pilot in there, and we have him in there good. He's epoxied in. I showed you that I can lift the airplane up with the pilot. Same with the air tank. The air tank was glued in with CA on the air tank side and white glue on the fuselage side, so we didn't have any runs. And now I'm debating whether I should go around the canopy. I think that I'm going to go around the canopy. Now I've wiped this out several times. I mean, over and over and over again. I can't express how much I blew the inside of the cockpit out to make sure that I got all the dust out of it. And now we're going to go around just the edge of the canopy. You got one shot to get it on. I've already poked some holes in the canopy so that we have a place to pin it. What really holds this canopy on is the superfill. And when I get this glued on there, we'll tape around and make a line, then sand on the plastic itself, tooth. I'll use 80 grit before I put the superfill on, so that the superfill goes from the fuselage to the canopy and acts as a binder. Now, I know this is boring, but I'm just letting the camera run. We got quite a bit of glue running down the outside here. Don't want that. I only want the glue on the inside. I don't want the glue on the outside. I guess if you were worried about it, you could tape it off on the outside before you put the glue on, but as long as you're careful. This is 15-minute epoxy, the Bob Smith brand. biggest thing about that is once you get it on there, walk away. We'll get it on and pin down, tape down, and walk away for an hour and come back. Okay, I've got the glue on it. I got glue on my hands, so I'm going to wipe my hands off before I set it on the I definitely don't want epoxy on the outside of the canopy. Okay, here we go. We got one chance to get it on right. I think I went through this the last time. You can't squish it together, so we'll get some tape on it. Okay, we got it on there, sort of. Need to push it down, tape it, pin it, whatever I got to do to get it to sit down on there. Okay. New roll of paper towels. We'll get the epoxy out of the way because I don't want to accidentally get that any on my hands and get it on the outside of the cockpit or the canopy. So, like I told you, just take your epoxy mixing book, tear the page out, throw it away. So next, we get a paper towel with some alcohol on it, and we're going to go around and wipe any of the, I see some glue on the outside at the seam. We're going to wipe that glue off and make sure there's nothing inside. That looks good. I have to get another bottle of 91 proof. We're almost out. So as you can see, it's a lot of work to get them ready. But it's well worth it in the end, I think. That's it. Let's see if I can get a pin on in the nose here. Maybe I'll get one in there. No, it doesn't really need it anyway. I made this fit so well that it really doesn't need any more than the 3 pins holding it on. So we'll be back in an hour when this all dries up, and we'll tape it off. I'm going to spray another line on the outside, then I'm going to put the super fill on it. So see you in an hour. Okay, while we're waiting for the canopy to dry, I'm sanding out the white blocking coat that I had just kind of sprayed on. We're going to be sanding between each coat, but we're not far now. I mean, once I get that canopy sanded in, we'll be painting. For real, not just plain. So, as the one member asked for, I'll show a few minutes of the sanding. And this here is just a leveling sand. I want to make sure that I don't have any high spots or nicks in the finish. I'm doing it wet, 600. We won't move to 1000 grit until it's got the next coat of paint on it. Because we're leveling it up, and I'm trying to be honest with you, I'm trying not to put a lot of weight on it. So we want to take off whatever I'm putting on and just leave a translucent amount of dope. It's been a couple of days that this has been on, so it's not gumming up. It's ready to sand, but you have to use water. The canopy looks like it's going to come out relatively decent. I'm glad that I put the one tank in there instead of the two, because I looked at them both, and I don't know. Tom had 2 tanks in his, but as I've stated before, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. But I wanted, to be close, because I always loved this airplane. I probably should have made it electric, but then it wouldn't be the classic airplane that I remember. They used to come down over the top, slobbering rich. When they turned the corner, it sounded like the motor was going to stop. And I'm hoping to bring all those memories back with this. And that's why I'm trying to do it as period correct as possible. I looked at that picture on the front of Model Airplane News 1971 again, and boy, that nose is really long. I bet it's got to be 11 and a half inches long, and I can see why that it wouldn't turn. because this doesn't have much elevator authority. These Detroiters had a pretty small elevator, stab elevator setup, and it's pretty short coupled. I think it's only about 15 1/4 moment. Let's see what it is. 15 inches is the tail moment, so you can't possibly move a nose that's a foot long around the corner. Anyway, I'm still sanding. We're still waiting on the canopy to dry, and we'll be back in a bit.